My name is Kim Klug. I am the Community Partnerships Manager here at Historic Royal Palaces.
And I'm Jatinder Kailey. I'm Community Partnerships Producer here at Historic Royal Palaces.
We're really delighted to be here and to host this event for ENLIVEN today. So just because it's about sharing our journey here at Historic Royal Palaces here at the Tower of London, but as well as we were saying how nice it is to be in a room with people, to be really present, to have those conversations while you're having coffee, to learn from each other, because it still feels like that hasn't happened in a long time. So thank you very much for making this possible. So a little bit about us. Historic Royal Palaces looks after 6 of the most wonderful palaces in the world. We're not too humble about that. We have our wonderful World Heritage Site, Tower of London, where you're here today. But we also look after Hampton Court, Banqueting House in Whitehall, Kensington Palace, Kew Palace, which is inside Kew Gardens, and Hillsborough Castle and Gardens in Northern Ireland. Our purpose as an independent charity is that we raise the funds to maintain and conserve our spaces, but we also want to inspire learning and connection with the stories. And to do this, we're guided by our cause, which is we stir every spirit to inspire and provoke change. Really what that means is we want to be more active with our storytelling, more active with engaging with heritage, and really reflecting and connecting. And some of the themes being brought up today is about belonging and creating that sense. For us in the community partnerships, when we talk about everyone and every spirit, we really focus on the people who are most local to us. So the people who are living, working, or studying near our palaces, our communities. And particularly, we focus on people who experience real or perceived barriers to visiting. Our programs that we run, we are a small team. We're now building slowly, but last year there were 3 of us, and we welcomed over 20,000 people to the palaces. It's just a drop in the ocean to the, how many millions come every year? 4 million, I think we're at now. So the work that we do is quite small in comparison, but the connections that we make and are really important and really vital to us as an organization. As I always say, what's the point? What is the point? I shouldn't say this with an HLF in the room, but what's the point in having these heritage sites if they don't mean anything to anybody, if people who are on the doorstep don't see them worth visiting and going to? For us, our program Living with People with Dementia and their companions is called Sensory Palaces. So as Stephen mentioned, this is where we met. Stephen, I was reflecting on this as I saw so many lovely friends and faces in the room. I have known some of the people in this room. I would say I was pregnant with my daughter when we worked on some of our work together. She's turning 6 in March, so it's been a while. And we haven't seen each other for a long time because of everything. But really where we got our start working with people with dementia is Sensory Palaces. As I reflected in the report, I have had dementia in my life with my family for over 2 decades now. A really long time. And I think a lot of people who kind of venture into this work is because they know somebody and they're affected by in a personal way that inspires this desire to encourage people to still, enjoy and have fun. That was one of the key things that came out of ENLIVEN. It's about having fun and enjoying life. We started Sensory Palaces in 2013 in response to that growing societal need for dementia-friendly services and inclusion work. Our team was inspired, by dementia and the belief that people living with dementia can continue to learn new things, as we just heard from our fantastic panel earlier. As you say, it's about experiencing life, learning, and having those shared moments in the moments, and not always that reflection on the past. At the time, a lot of the work and practice we'd seen happening out there was very memory-based, but working at sites like ours, where, Hampton Court, not very many people can personally remember the times of the Tudors. So it's very much about kind of that experience of learning new things. And that's where we started the Dementia-Friendly Heritage Network. So we worked with our peer group to create best practice for dementia-inclusive practice. But our main aim for Sensory Palaces is about telling those stories using the senses in our historic spaces. It's really about, being alive. We evaluated that program kind of every which way we could. to its point. We looked at logistics, we looked at the practicalities of the spaces, we talked to our peer network to share and learn best practice. We brought in an academic researcher to look at how heritage impacts the people living with dementia and the companions. And we, really got ourselves at a good place with that. And then, COVID happened. So that kind of put a pause on things there for us. We came back to work in 2021 after that pause, and so much has changed, and that has impacted our sensory palaces program. We kind of got back on site and just picked up where we left off, and just kept going with it. But so much in our society has changed. We were delighted when ENLIVEN came to us and told us about the project, and we're very happy to support that as longtime friends, Stephen and Joanne. But there was a reason for us engaging with it, because as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of focus in the heritage sector when we think about our indoor spaces, like into heritage museums, we're like indoors because practically we don't have to worry about the rain and we can control it. So we can control that experience a lot more. But when the focus switched to our outdoor space, we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? There's all these things we have to think about. And I remember, working on that halfway through the application process for ENLIVEN. And I said, we can really focus on the gardens at Hampton Court. That'd be great. A new, string to our bow where we haven't really looked at the gardens before. And we felt really confident with that. And then I said, wait a minute, if we really want to innovate, if we really want to test ourselves, let's go to the Tower of London because, it's 1,000-year-old. Why not? Let's give it a go. And we know one thing we always say at HRP, at Historic Royal Palaces, and if you can make it at the Tower, if you can make it work at the Tower of London, you can make it work anywhere. So that's where we came to be. And we used, in 2022, our beautiful new landscape and the moat.
Yeah, so in 2022, Superboard transformed the Tower of London moat from a neglected turfed lawn into a joyful floral landscape in celebration of the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Superbloom created a biodiverse habitat for pollinators, insects, and seed-eating birds, as well as providing a sense of well-being for visitors who could actively explore and engage in a new natural green space in the centre of London. The moat is now permanently transformed, creating a natural landscape for visitors to connect with nature and the history of the moat. The Tower of London is our most challenging site for visitors due to its physicality and darker histories. The moat transformation is incredibly exciting. It is incredibly exciting for us as it opens a host of opportunities, most notably providing an easily accessible space with a focus of nature and well-being and a lighter historic content. So this will enable us to engage those who dismiss the tower as a place to visit due to its challenging access and stories. So obviously, due to the nature of the tower, it's not the most obvious site for dementia-friendly work, but that isn't a reason why we should shy away from it. Having a strong, proven track record of dementia-friendly work across HRP sites, for example, the Sensory Palaces program. The moat kind of opens up new opportunities for us of working with new audiences at the tower. So what we did through initial contacts with deep groups. So we worked with Ashford Place in Cricklewood, Bromley Mindcare, so we got Syra here today, and Age Concern from Camden. These three discrete groups were invited to visit the tower with transport funded by the ENLIVEN Project. We had a total of 52 people attend the visits. Each group visit was scheduled to last around 3 hours or less, with logistics and on-site planning and development undertaken by the Community Partnership team. So each group had 2 visits over the course of June to September of last year. The first visit was a simple walkthrough of the site and the moat, with opportunity for each group to give us feedback about their visitor experience. The second visit was then a much more enhanced experience. It began with a well-being walk through the moat with added storytelling from John, who is here with us today, and I think he'll probably explain a bit more about that later in his session. And he shared secrets of the moat with groups. The groups were then taken to our learning spaces for object handling, which included archaeological objects that we found from the moat, reminiscence activities and craft activities such as memory box making of their visit to the tower. So I'll just quickly run through this, but this I think is in the handouts that you've been given. So it's just a kind of visitor experience of the groups when they came on site. And then the challenges, there were many challenges, and we knew that when we started this, that it was going to be a very challenging project for us. So obviously we know the physicality of the tower presents a host of barriers. You may have experienced some of these barriers for yourself today. Our groups arrive on Tower Hill, which can be very busy. It was challenging to find each other and then finding a space that was quiet enough to welcome them and outline kind of their itinerary for the day. There are cobbles, uneven surfaces, the crowds, the noise. We were delivering the project over the summer, which is the tower's busiest time. On any given day between June and September, you can get up to 12,000 visitors coming to the tower. But the moat is a quiet space compared to the rest of the site. So that was great. So in addition to this, we have internal challenges as well. We have some wheelchairs available on site, but we can't reserve them. And this is an issue because whilst people may not use a wheelchair day to day, they may need one when trying to get around the tower. Our facilities were also not exactly suitable for our groups, just in general at the tower. The toilet blocks are used by everyone, by all visitors. We don't have separate toilet blocks for pre-booked groups, so that led to like long waits and queues on arrival. Our learning spaces are located well within the tower walls at the top of the hill, so it's just over there in the Waterloo block. So it is very challenging from like as soon as you enter to just get there. That's a journey in itself. And we also had to manage expectations on the day. When people come to the Tower of London, obviously the first thing you probably think of is the crown jewels, and that's a kind of draw in itself. And we which wasn't really the focus of this project. So it was kind of having that perception change was also a bit of a challenge. So what we learned, we've understood our limitations as a site, and I've come to realize that actually working with small groups is probably the best thing for us. The tower as a whole works with large visitor numbers and does everything in big volumes. However, when working with vulnerable people and groups, smaller group size works best. So we tested group sizes of 10, 20 and 30 people. And obviously the overall visitor experience for the group of 30 was considerably a lot different to the group of 10. Visible identifiers for the group are helpful when working in busy crowds. So for example, Syra fantastically had everyone in her group wearing like the same t-shirt. She also had like a flag, so it was easy for the group to kind of spot where she was when we were...
Yeah, on the t-shirts.
When we were kind of just...
Charity in this budget.
When we were walking around the site, it was really easy for everyone in her group to kind of spot her. It was also really helpful for us to have our internal different teams involved and volunteering their time with us. For example, we had our development team actually help with Syra's group. And it was great because they were able to see firsthand the challenges we faced when bringing groups on site. And that's really helped when it comes to like fundraising for better facilities and wheelchairs. Also partnering with the University of Exeter has helped us to document the barriers our group space when visiting on site. These are things we've always known about, but we've never really got the evidence in the form of like an evaluation report. So we were then able to share those findings internally to other teams within our organization. And we also learnt that the tower can be a multifaceted site. The moat became an opportunity to explore the softer side of the tower and opened our programming to explore nature and historic context. However, we also learnt that we can't underestimate the well-known attractions of our site. For example, the crown jewels. And I guess we kind of had to factor that into our visits as well. We couldn't bring like groups who hadn't been to the tower in however many years and kind of not let them experience the crown jewels. So definitely had to factor that in. So I guess next steps.
So this is a draft of what we hope to have. Well, I think we've got the final one now, but a draft of what we're going to try on next. So one of the things, as we say, we do everything kind of by volume here. And one of the things we found out through sensory palaces that we've been delivering at Hampton Court and the shift in the program that we're looking at there is that we've always worked in a way of doing dementia-exclusive programming. So we invite people in, we control that welcome, we make sure everything's looked after, and that's fine. But I think was mentioned earlier, we can't control that welcome on a day-to-day basis. You turn up, you buy a ticket, you may or may not, or you're with may or may not have dementia or a cognitive impairment. So the shift that we're trying to go to as an organization or as a team is to make sure that we have greater resources available. So when somebody arrives and they want to have a different experience of our palace, that they'll have a resource there available. So for us, we're trialing that in the moat. So we've got this resource, which is on one side, it has both the well-being aspects of the moat. So I think reading a poem while you're sat there, because unfortunately we can't go down there. It's not very pretty today anyway, but when you go down and the flowers are up and you're sat on a bench, even though you can hear the sirens right now, when you're in that moat, it's almost like you're not in central London. You're not surrounded by the greyness of this area, and you can see the bees and the butterflies. It's absolutely beautiful. And in this part of London where it's really grey, actually it's a fantastic release to be in that space. So it really focuses on that well-being side. But another thing we also found, while we kind of were pushing the well-being element of the bloom down there, we found people were like, well, why is there a moat? So it also has that history side that says, what has a moat been? It's been a dry moat for defense. It's been a cesspit, basically. It's been, something it's been a site of celebration and commemoration, and the moat's been all of those things. So it's looking at the well-being and the historic context, both in that resource. And the aim is that we'll have that available. We'll brand it in some way, whether that's putting a sunflower or a forget-me-not on it or just having it out there, that people can pick up and use, and that can be used by anybody. So what we've learned from this kind of to feed into our wider program is we've taken a pause generally on our sensory palace program, that we're on this treadmill of delivery at Hampton Court, because what we've learned, I was talking to Sarah earlier, what we've learned from working with groups and with deep groups is that our sensory palace program didn't allow for groups to visit. It was always the person with dementia and companions was always for like a couple. And what we're looking at is, do we look at sensory palace to have that group offer, and how do we logistically make that happen? Our palace opening has also changed considerably. So, and where we are as an organization has changed a lot from the pre-COVID to after. So Hampton Court is only open 5 days a week. So we have days where it's closed to the public. So do we look at having just more people on a day where we're quiet? Do we look at having quiet times in the afternoon, and we publicly make those available? We turn off the soundscapes, and we know one thing we have to do, say, well, you mentioned the warm welcome, and it's something, talking to Q, it's like, we're one team within this massive organization that spans several sites. And one thing we need to be better is taking people on that journey with us about inclusion and welcomes, so that it's something just as a practice we do. If anyone to a States or gone to a Walmart, I hate to say the Walmart greeter, but maybe that's what we need to incorporate. at our sites. There's just somebody there that just looks at everybody who walks through and says, hi, welcome, and how can I help you? So it is that move that we're going to make from dementia exclusive to inclusive. And yeah, I guess that's where we are. So thank you. We did that.